Big thanks to SetApp for sponsoring our channel this month. SetApp, an app for every job already on your Mac. If you haven't heard, Apple's getting into the streaming TV business, which means it's gonna be battling against HBO, Amazon Prime, Hulu, and of course, Netflix. But does Apple even stand a chance against Netflix? And is anybody gonna watch without gratuitous nudity, violence, or profanity? That's what we're exploring today, and when I say me, I mean me and my buddy Rene Ritchie. While Apple's original content initiative gets started from scratch, Netflix already has some big advantages. They've got more eyeballs, more Emmys, and a bigger catalog. Even so, just the recent speculation from an analyst predicting big success for Apple's new streaming efforts was enough to make Netflix stock slide 6%. But what exactly does Netflix even have to fear? Well, a few things, actually, despite the fact that Apple's mostly shying away from darker, edgier, more adult-themed content, which many people seem to think of as a deal killer, but we'll talk about that in just a sec. Today's video is sponsored by Hairball, makers and sellers of some super handy lightning to USB cable packs. Sold on Amazon, you can pick up a 4-pack with a 3-foot cable, 2 6-foot cables, and a 10-foot cable for just 17 bucks. With the flexible and durable nylon braided design, each cable is rated to survive more than 10,000 bends. Check them out after this video using the link down in the description. In the coming war with Netflix, Apple does have some pretty potent weapons. There's over 1 billion active Apple devices around the world, which translates into a huge potential audience. And the size of that audience has already attracted some big names, like Spielberg, Shyamalan, Aniston, Evans, and even Oprah, among others. Plus, Apple's reportedly willing to spend over $4 billion on creating original content over the next few years, which is not a small number. And then, there's what many people see as Apple's secret weapon: the ability to bundle streaming TV and movie content with music and magazines, something Netflix simply wouldn't have an answer to. Critics, however, seem to think that Apple's plan has one massive flaw, and that's what we're about to jump into. Netflix, HBO, Amazon Prime, and Hulu all produce original TVMA content, which is the TV equivalent to being rated R, while Apple, on the other hand, is limiting itself to producing mostly family-friendly PG-13 style content. The reason Apple's doing this is simple. It needs to protect its core business, which right now is selling iPhones, and to do that, it needs to maintain a sparkling brand image. If Apple did produce some content that ended up offending a bunch of people, those people might not buy Apple's products, which could be a big problem for it, and it's a problem that Netflix is never gonna have to face. Now, Apple's critics are saying that if the company limits itself to producing content with a broader appeal, then the content it produces is going to be lame, prude, vanilla, or really, really bad. Why? Well, the consensus seems to be that non-TVMA content is not creative, and therefore must be boring. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Well-known actor, director, writer, and producer Orson Welles once said that the enemy of art is the absence of limitations. Now that's coming from a guy who knew a thing or two about creating content. This isn't an isolated thought. Frank Gehry, the famous architect who designed the Guggenheim Museum and the Disney Concert Hall, says that limitations and constraints are actually what inspired his work. A great example of limitations producing unparalleled creativity is when Ernest Hemingway supposedly bet some friends he could write a short story in just 6 words, which were for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Limited? Yes. Emotional? Very. Creative? Absolutely. Lots of talented creators from various genres could actually be labeled family-friendly. Rapper Andy Mineo, YouTubers Rhett and Link, Will Smith in 99. But for an example of how Apple could produce hit content that steers clear of mature themes, all you need to do is take a look at the films of the Marvel Universe. Marvel hits like Captain America: Civil War, Thor: Ragnarok, and Black Panther were loved by audiences and critics alike, each having scored over 90% on Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter. On the other hand, plenty of people also loved Deadpool, which was rated R and which broke several box office records. But as the directors of Guardians of the Galaxy says, movie studio execs might have taken away the wrong lessons from Deadpool's success. He says movies like Deadpool are crucial because they prove you can still wring fresh life from an old formula, not because they prove it's possible to curse while wearing spandex. The gist of what he's getting at is that audiences crave originality, creativity, more than anything else. Slash Films' Angie Han adds, it's easier to copy a successful formula than it is to come up with a new one, And there's no doubt some studios will assume that Deadpool's success is a sign that audiences want an endless stream of raunchy, violent, fourth-wall breaking superhero movies. Clearly, Apple doesn't intend to do the easy thing and copy its rivals by swimming out into those more mature waters. Apple's self-limiting strategy can produce creative results, if for no other reason than because it has to. That's just the nature of constrained resources. Now, will every original show Apple produces be a hit? No, and the same thing applies to Netflix. But Apple's already announced several shows that have piqued my personal interest. What I'm most interested in so far are the shows with the sci-fi slant, like Foundation, an adaptation of Isaac Asimov's super influential sci-fi story, and like the revival of Spielberg's sci-fi and fantasy anthology, Amazing Stories. There's also C, a futuristic world-building drama, and finally, an untitled series that explores what would happen if the global space race had never ended. And shows I could definitely see other people getting into include Defending Jacob, a legal thriller starring Captain America's Chris Evans, Shantaram, the story of an escaped Australian convict who disappears into the Bombay Underground, an M. Night Shyamalan thriller, a series about the lives of basketball players, their families, and coaches, and a show starring Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston. But in the midst of all this media fury over Apple's sanitized content plans, I have to ask myself, what's the big deal? What's wrong with Tim Cook or Apple wanting more upbeat content? Sure, TVMA shows like Black Mirror can be thought-provoking, and that can be important, but imagine if all you could consume was darker, edgier content. With all the bad stuff going on around the world, would it really be that bad to have some more lighthearted content? I mean, even with Apple launching a slate of family-friendly shows, you'll always have access to the TVMA content offered by its rivals. It's also worth noting that Apple's never allowed mature content on the App Store, and the App Store has been wildly successful without it. So, can Apple beat Netflix even without TVMA content? Well, Apple's access to a huge potential audience, combined with its abilities to attract big-name talent and unleash a unique streaming bundle, should all help Apple establish a strong foothold in the industry. And clearly, creating content without a TVMA label shouldn't be a creativity killer. I think the thing that's probably going to scare Apple's streaming rivals the most is the fact that Apple has all the time and all the money in the world to figure out a winning strategy. Their resources are pretty unlimited, and like they say, where there's a will, there's a way. And somehow I have a feeling this isn't a zero-sum game. It's very likely that people will end up subscribing to multiple services instead of just picking one over all others. And if that's the case, then maybe everyone wins. My buddy Rene Ritchie has some excellent thoughts to add, but before I kick it over to him, I really just have to say, if you're not subscribed to his channel yet, you really should be. Here's Rene.
Hey Chris, thank you so much for having me on. So I have two quick thoughts on Apple getting into the content game. The first is, unless they do something substantial like buying Disney, they're not going to have a huge catalog. And that's really what let companies like Netflix and like Hulu get on the map with a subscription service. Nobody wants to pay $10 a month for just a few new shows. They want to pay $10 a month for a few new shows, plus seasons, years, a decade of back content. So Apple's really going to have to do something special to show value. And I think the most likely strategy there is just to combine it with the existing Apple Music and the upcoming Apple Magazine service, and to provide a unified Apple content experience at one low price. As for the content itself, I'm not really worried about Apple avoiding TVMA. Yeah, it will make some restrictions. Yeah, it will lose some flexibility. But if you look back over time, some of the greatest television series in history haven't been anywhere close to TVMA. Just look at The West Wing. Aaron Sorkin managed to produce hour after hour of incredibly dramatic, riveting television without any sex or any violence. The most important thing I think Apple has to do, though, is to hire experts and then trust them to run it. You can't have Eddie Q or Tim Cook making the content decisions. They have to pick people who understand Apple and then let them run. Thank you so much for having me on.
See? Insightful as always. Now, I'm going to leave a link to Rene's channel down in the description, so make sure to check it out. And I'm going to wrap this up with the question. Are you excited for Apple's streaming content initiative? Let me know why or why not down in the comments. And don't forget, you can follow me. I'm at Daily Tech, spelled Daily, T-E-K-K, on Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you find yourself. So make sure to follow me there, and I'll catch you in the next video. Later.